The applause had ended hours ago, but the echo still lived inside the room. The chandelier above her flickered softly, throwing fragments of light across the marble floor. Elaine Whitmore sat at her dining table, still wearing the wedding gown she swore she wouldn't cry in. The hem brushed against the cold tiles, gathering wrinkles and silence in equal measure. A teacup sat before her, half full, untouched since morning. The steam had long gone, leaving only the faint scent of chamomile and something heavier. Regret, maybe. Her makeup was still perfect, her hair pinned, her posture straight. Only her eyes betrayed the truth. The kind of quiet that doesn't need words to say alone. The apartment stretched around her like a museum of better days. Photographs lined the piano, each one a chapter she could no longer rewrite. Her late husband smiling, her daughter as a child, a family frozen in the light of what once was. But one frame was missing. It lay face down near the edge of the table. She hadn't found the courage to turn it over since the ceremony. Outside, the city lights glowed in soft amber, scattered across the skyline. They looked almost festive, as if the world was celebrating something she no longer believed in. She reached for her wedding ring, the new one, thin, gold, and still unfamiliar. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like weight, like something earned too late. And yet beneath that quiet ache, a strange calm lingered. Not happiness, not sorrow, something in between, like peace and punishment sharing the same breath. She closed her eyes and let the silence answer what no one else could. The chair creaked softly as she leaned back. And then, with the kind of stillness that feels like surrender, she whispered to the room. Was this love or loneliness dressed in vows? The city didn't respond. Only the clock did. Each second marking the distance between now and the moment everything began. And so softly, memory turned the page, back to the beginning, to the day she first saw him. It had been another gray Tuesday at Whitmore Industries, the kind that came with rain on the windows and tension in the air. The boardroom smelled of coffee, paper, and faint impatience. Numbers were projected on the wall, men cleared their throats, and the world moved in circles. That was when Ryan Cole walked in. Tall, 34, eyes like stormlight. No one expected much. Another consultant, another voice with a plan. But when he spoke, the room stilled. Not because his presentation was perfect, it wasn't. It was because he believed every word he said. And belief has a sound you can't fake. Elaine watched him from the far end of the table. 12 executives, 40 slides, and yet her attention stayed with one man who didn't seem to need attention at all. He spoke of digital transformation, future growth, and rebuilding what others had quietly given up on. And in that moment, something in her, something buried under years of polished caution, shifted. When the meeting ended, he gathered his files and thanked her directly. No flattery, no hesitation. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't want to change your company. I just want to remind it how to breathe again." The line was simple, but it stayed, like the first ripple on still water. That afternoon, she found herself glancing at the glass door as he left. She told herself it was curiosity. But curiosity has always been where memory begins. For weeks after, their paths crossed in quiet ways. A shared elevator ride. A coffee left on her desk with a small note. No sugar, just like last time. A conversation about nothing that somehow felt like something. Elaine didn't believe in coincidence. She believed in timing. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, life was asking her to listen again. She didn't yet know that Ryan Cole carried more than ambition, that his calm voice hid a history tied to her own. But that truth, like all truth that matter, was patient. It waited in the shadows, biding its time. The first sign came quietly, an unread message on Elaine's phone. Melissa Whitmore never used short texts, but this one was only 4 words. "Mom, who is Ryan Cole?" Elaine read it twice. The cursor blinked back at her like a pulse. She didn't reply. By evening, Melissa was standing in her doorway, arms folded, eyes wide in disbelief. No words at first, just that long, painful silence between a mother and daughter who both knew what was coming. "Mom," she finally said, her voice trembling, "please tell me it's not true." Elaine tried to answer, but truth has a way of shrinking the air. She gestured toward the sofa, hoping the softness of the furniture would make the conversation easier. It didn't. Melissa sat down but never took off her coat. "I saw you," she said, "at the restaurant, with him." Elaine nodded. "Yes, he's been consulting for the company." Melissa's voice sharpened. "And now he's consulting your heart?" The sentence landed like a slap without sound. Elaine took a slow breath. "He's kind, Melissa. He listens. You have no idea how rare that becomes at my age." Melissa's eyes filled. not with anger but with fear. "Mom, you don't know who he is. You don't know what he's done." Elaine frowned. "What do you mean?" Melissa looked away, voice soft but trembling. "When Dad died, you said the hospital never told you everything. You were right. There was a young paramedic that night, a trainee. His name was Ryan Cole." The name hung in the air, sharp as glass. Elaine froze. "That can't be true." "I checked," Melissa whispered. "He was there, Mom. He was part of the emergency team that failed Dad. And now you're letting him back into our lives?" For a moment, all Elaine could hear was the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Each second seemed louder than the last. "I don't believe you," she said softly, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Melissa stood. "Then ask him," she said. "And when you do, please, stop this before it destroys you." Then she turned and left, leaving the door open behind her, letting the night drift in. Elaine stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where her daughter had been. The air smelled faintly of rain. She realized her hands were shaking. Love had never frightened her before. But this felt like standing at the edge of something deep, with the truth whispering from below. Elaine didn't sleep that night. The city hummed beyond her windows, cars moving like fireflies in restless rhythm. Every light in the penthouse was off except one, the small lamp beside her favorite chair. She stared at the door until dawn, waiting for Ryan. When his knock finally came, she didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, smiling at first, until he saw her face. No words of greeting, no warmth, just stillness. "Ryan," she said quietly, "were you there the night my husband died?" The question landed between them like thunder that never needed to be loud. Ryan's shoulders sank. He didn't try to lie. He didn't even try to explain. He just nodded. "Yes," he said. "I was there." Elaine's breath caught in her throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to see me as the man who failed him," Ryan said softly. "I was 23, a trainee. I did everything I could, but your husband, he was already slipping when they brought him in." Elaine stared, trying to find anger, but what came instead was confusion. He looked older in that moment, haunted, human. "I stayed with him," Ryan continued, voice breaking. "Everyone else moved on to another case, but I stayed. He asked me to tell you something." Elaine's chest tightened. "What?" Ryan looked up, eyes wet. "He said he was sorry, that he should have come home more, that he never stopped loving you." The room went silent, except for her heartbeat. The last words she'd never heard from the man she once built an empire beside, now spoken by another. Tears blurred her vision. Her fingers trembled against the arm of the chair. Ryan took a step closer. "I didn't mean to hide it. I just wanted you to see me without the past between us." Elaine closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. She whispered, "You should have told me sooner." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to tell you when you could hear it as love, not pain." She looked at him then, not as the young man who'd entered her company, but as the echo of a truth she wasn't ready for. Outside, the city lights dimmed beneath the sunrise. And in that fragile half-light, Elaine realized love doesn't always arrive innocent. Sometimes it comes carrying the weight of what it once couldn't save. For days, the apartment held its breath. Elaine Whitmore didn't call Ryan, and he didn't come. The phone stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a person hear their own doubts louder than any ringtone ever could. She tried to fill the space, reading, watering the plants, even reorganizing her books, but everything she touched reminded her of him. A coffee mug he once used, a tie he'd left draped over her chair. Little ghosts of a life she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. When people saw her at work, they didn't ask. They just whispered. She could feel it, the weight of judgment pressing down like humidity before a storm. Some looked at her with pity, others with quiet envy. But it was Melissa's silence that hurt most. Not a word, not a message, just absence, steady and cold. One night, Elaine stood by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like it was tracing her thoughts. She remembered what Ryan had said, how her husband's last words carried an apology she'd never received. And for the first time, she wondered if Ryan had been sent not to hurt her, but to free her, to close a door she'd been standing in for too long. Still, doubt lingered. Not about love, but about perception. Because when you've lived 63 years building a name, a reputation, a company that people trust, falling in love with someone half your age isn't just personal, it's public. And forgiveness, in public, rarely comes easy. A soft knock broke her thoughts. When she opened the door, Ryan stood there, drenched, breathless, holding nothing but truth in his eyes. "I couldn't stay away," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forget what I kept from you, but I can't let silence be what finishes us." Elaine's heart thudded painfully. She wanted to be angry, to protect herself with pride. But pride had kept her lonely long enough. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said. And for the first time in weeks, warmth returned to the room. He didn't speak much that night. Neither did she. They sat together on the couch, a safe distance apart, and let the sound of the rain fill what words couldn't. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't begin with explanation. It begins with presence. And that night, as the city blurred beyond the glass, Elaine realized she didn't need to decide everything yet. She only needed to stay open long enough to remember what love once felt like before the world had rules for it. By spring, life had found a rhythm again. Not perfect, just steady. Elaine worked during the day. Ryan kept his distance but never disappeared completely. There were brief lunches, polite smiles, and the kind of eye contact that said more than words dared to. The company's anniversary gala was approaching, a tradition Elaine had upheld for 30 years. This one was special. She planned to step down from her position afterward, to finally rest, to live differently. When the board asked who would accompany her, she said nothing. But deep down, she already knew. 2 nights before the event, Ryan appeared at her door again, holding a simple envelope. Inside, a handwritten invitation. "To dinner," he said softly, "just us. Before the world has opinions again." She almost smiled. "You never give up, do you? Only on things that don't matter." He replied. The restaurant was quiet, candle-lit, the kind of place where conversations whispered instead of echoed. He told her about his mother, how she'd raised him alone, how she died young, and how he'd always admired women who carried strength like a heartbeat. Elaine listened, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. There was something in his voice, humility, not performance. She realized then that he didn't see her as an age, or a title, or a headline. He saw her as someone still learning how to let love in. When the check came, she reached for it automatically, habit of a lifetime. Ryan smiled and covered her hand gently. "Let me do this one thing for you," he said. "Just this once." It wasn't the words that moved her. It was the quiet respect beneath them. Back home that night, Elaine found herself looking at the framed photo of Melissa again. She whispered to it, "I wish you could see him like I do." Then, almost without thinking, she slipped the invitation back into its envelope and tucked it into her desk drawer beside a stack of old letters from her late husband. A strange peace filled her chest. Not certainty, not even happiness, just peace. The next morning, she told her assistant to finalize her gown for the gala. And when asked if she would bring a guest, she answered simply, "Yes, his name is Ryan Cole." That single sentence spread through the office faster than any press release. By noon, the news had reached Melissa. And by evening, a message appeared on Elaine's phone again. "Mom, please don't do this." But this time, Elaine didn't delete it. She read it twice, then closed her eyes and whispered, "I have to." The night of the gala arrived with the kind of calm that always comes before change. The city glittered below the tall glass windows of the Whitmore Tower ballroom. Inside, everything gleamed: silverware, chandeliers, smiles polished for photographs. Elaine Whitmore stepped out of her car in a long midnight blue gown. She looked serene, though her heart was a metronome of doubt. At 63, she had faced boardroom battles and market crashes, but never this: the quiet rebellion of choosing love in a room full of judgment. Ryan Cole met her at the entrance, black suit, tie slightly crooked, eyes uncertain but kind. He didn't touch her hand, not yet. He waited, reading her face like a man who knew how fragile courage could be. Inside, the orchestra played a slow waltz, and heads turned. Conversations dimmed to whispers. "Is that him?" someone said softly. "The consultant? The one she's—" Elaine heard it all. Every half-finished sentence, every polite smile that ended too soon. She smiled anyway, the way one learns to after decades of leading. But inside she was trembling. Not from shame, from the exhaustion of pretending not to feel. At the far end of the room, Melissa stood among the guests, her expression unreadable. It had been months since they'd spoken face to face. The sight of her daughter there, beautiful and distant, nearly undid her. Ryan noticed the shift in her breathing. He leaned slightly closer, whispering, "You don't owe them anything, Elaine. You've earned the right to live on your own terms." The sound of her name in his voice steadied her. When it came time for her speech, Elaine walked to the podium. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, the only sound in the hall. She looked out at faces she had known half her life. Partners, investors, critics, friends, and she said simply, Tonight, I close one chapter and begin another. For 30 years, I've built this company with my mind. It's time I start building my life with my heart." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some smiled, others shifted uncomfortably. Melissa turned away. Ryan stood quietly at the edge of the room, his eyes locked on hers, and for a moment the noise faded. The room, the lights, the world. Until all that remained was two people standing on opposite sides of fear, trying to find the courage to meet in the middle. That night, when it ended, she didn't go home alone. But she didn't go with him, either. She went for a walk through the quiet streets, the sound of her own footsteps echoing softly, as if the city itself was reminding her that change is always loudest in silence. By morning, the story had left the ballroom and entered the world. Every major business outlet had a headline. Whitmore Industries CEO steps down, appears publicly with younger partner. The photographs were merciless, her smile frozen mid-sentence. Ryan standing a step behind her, eyes lowered. The captioned one picture read, "A new chapter or a costly mistake?" Elaine's phone vibrated endlessly that day. Messages from the board, from investors, from people who once called her a visionary, now questioning her judgment like it was a stock price that had fallen overnight. She ignored most of them. But when Melissa's number flashed on the screen, she couldn't. The call was short. "Mom," her daughter said, voice thick with emotion, "you're giving them what they want, a scandal." Elaine's reply came slowly, steady but soft. "I'm giving myself what I need. Honesty." Melissa exhaled sharply. "You've worked your whole life to be respected. Don't throw it away for someone who's half your age." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elaine said something she hadn't planned to say. "Respect built my career. But love might save what's left of me." The silence that followed was long enough to hear Melissa's breathing change, somewhere between disbelief and sorrow. That night, Ryan arrived at her apartment unannounced. He looked exhausted, holding a folded newspaper in his hand. "They're coming after you," he said. "You could lose everything, your reputation, your board seat, your credibility." Elaine smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes when you've already made peace with the storm. "I've lost worse," she said. "I've lost time, and I'm done losing that." He stood still for a moment, studying her face, not as the woman everyone talked about, but as someone quietly choosing her own peace, even if the world mistook it for recklessness. The paper slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. He reached for hers instead, and in that small, unplanned gesture, Elaine realized that sometimes redemption doesn't look like forgiveness. It looks like staying when leaving would have been easier. Outside, another round of headlines went live, but she didn't open them. For the first time in her long life, the noise didn't matter. What mattered was the stillness between two people in a world too loud to understand them. The weeks that followed blurred into quiet defiance. Elaine Whitmore didn't attend meetings, didn't return calls. The office lights stayed off in her corner suite for the first time in 30 years. Her world had narrowed to the essentials: a few books, long walks, and the stillness she'd earned. But peace, even when deserved, never stays unchallenged. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in her mailbox. No return address, just her name typed cleanly in black ink. Inside was a letter. The paper smelled faintly of antiseptic, like something once kept in a hospital drawer. It was from a retired nurse named Helen Moore. Her handwriting trembled across the page. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I don't know if this brings comfort or pain, but I was there the night your husband, Ryan Cole, was not to blame. In fact, he stayed long after the doctors left. He took the blame for a call that wasn't his to make. Your husband's heart had already failed, but that young man, he tried until his hands shook. I thought you should know the truth." Elaine read it twice, the ink blurring slightly beneath her tears. All this time she had held her husband's death like an unfinished sentence, never sure where to place the blame. And now the ending she had feared had quietly rewritten itself. She folded the letter carefully, set it beside the framed photo of Melissa, and whispered to no one, "So that's what you were carrying, Ryan." The phone rang not long after. Melissa's voice came through, tight and uncertain. "I saw the papers, Mom. I shouldn't have called you names. I was just hurt," Elaine finished gently. "I know." There was a long pause, a shared silence where love used to live easily. "Did you know he tried to save your father?" Elaine asked. Melissa hesitated. I didn't believe it when he said that." "It's true," Elaine said, "and I think your father would have wanted you to know that too." Neither spoke again for a while. It was the kind of pause that doesn't end a conversation. It simply waits for the next chapter. That night, Elaine walked out onto her balcony, the city glowing like a memory beneath her feet. She felt lighter somehow, as if the truth had pulled a splinter she hadn't realized she was still bleeding from. Below, cars drifted along the boulevard. Above, the moon hung quiet and constant, a silent witness to a woman who had finally forgiven both the living and the dead. The morning came soft and pale. The air held that tender stillness that belongs to early summer, the kind of day that begins with the sound of distant church bells and the smell of rain not yet fallen. Ryan Cole showed up without warning. No flowers, no grand gestures, just a man standing at her door holding a small box and a look that asked for permission before hope. Elaine let him in. He seemed nervous, uncharacteristically so. For months he'd been the calm one, steady, patient, willing to wait for her to come around, but today he was humanly unsure. "I wasn't going to do this," he said, setting the box on the table. "Not now, not while everything's still loud out there. But sometimes if you wait for the noise to stop, you'll never hear what really matters." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "Ryan, what is this?" He opened the box. Not a diamond, not gold, but a simple band made from brushed silver, engraved on the inside with 2 words, "Still here." "I don't want to take anything from you," he said. "Not your name, not your past, not your peace. I just want to build what's left of my life beside yours. No audience, no apology." Elaine's hand trembled slightly as she touched the ring. At her age, proposals felt almost foreign, a language she'd forgotten how to answer in. "You're sure?" she asked quietly. "After all this?" Ryan smiled faintly. "Love doesn't ask what people will think. It just asks, will you stay?" For a long time, she said nothing, only watched him, the young man who had unknowingly carried her husband's last words, and somehow delivered her own heart back to her. Finally, she whispered, "Yes." He exhaled, like someone who had been holding his breath for a lifetime. No applause followed, no champagne, just the quiet rhythm of 2 hearts realigning in a world that had spent months trying to keep them apart. Elaine slid the ring onto her finger and smiled. It didn't shine like the first one had years ago, but this time she didn't need it to. Outside, a breeze moved through the curtains, soft as forgiveness. And in that moment, Elaine Whitmore understood something she had spent 63 years learning, that love doesn't arrive to erase the past. It comes to make peace with it. It was a small ceremony. No string quartet, no grand hall, no photographers this time. Just a quiet garden tucked behind an old chapel where the air smelled faintly of roses and rain. Elaine Whitmore arrived early. She wore a soft cream dress, simple, elegant, with sleeves that brushed her wrists. No veil, no bouquet. Only a ring that already waited on her hand and a heart that had made its choice long before this morning. Ryan Cole stood near the altar, adjusting his tie the way nervous men do when they're not sure what to do with their hands. He looked up as she entered. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to pause in quiet acknowledgement of something long overdue. Guests filled the pews, except for a few familiar faces. Dr. Olivia Marks, the friend who had seen Elaine through loss and grief. Harold Bennett, her longtime colleague, whose respect outweighed his unspoken affection. And one empty chair in the front row. That chair had been left intentionally. A place for her daughter. Elaine didn't expect her to come. Melissa hadn't answered her last message. Still, she left the seat. Because love, even when tested, always leaves a place for return. The officiant spoke softly. No vows rehearsed, no grand declarations. Just 2 people, both scarred in their own ways, choosing each other not for rescue, but for peace. When he asked if anyone objected, the wind moved through the garden, rustling the trees as if nature itself had sighed. No voices rose. No one stood. And so, with trembling hands, they exchanged rings. The moment was brief, but in its brevity lived everything that mattered. The forgiveness of time, the gentleness of truth, the courage to begin again. As the ceremony ended, Elaine looked toward the empty chair one last time. It remained still, until a soft movement caught her eye. Melissa stood by the garden gate, raincoat draped over her arm, eyes glassy with hesitation. She hadn't stepped inside, but she had come. Elaine's throat tightened. She didn't move or speak, she simply smiled. Small, patient, and full of love that didn't need words. Melissa smiled back, faintly, like someone beginning to forgive the past without fully understanding how. When the guests left, Elaine and Ryan stayed behind. He took her hand, brushing a tear from her cheek. "She came," he whispered. "She did," Elaine replied. "That's enough." And as the clouds broke above them, sunlight fell across the garden like a benediction. A quiet reminder that love's approval needn't come from the world, only from the ones who still choose to show up when it matters most. Weeks passed before life found its rhythm again. The newspapers moved on to other stories. The whispers faded, and for the first time in years, Elaine's mornings belonged to peace instead of pressure. The penthouse felt different now, not emptier, but lighter. The piano was no longer a monument to memory. It was music again. Sometimes Ryan played, clumsy, patient, laughing when he missed a note. Other times, she read aloud from her old journals, rediscovering the woman she'd been before success became her armor. Melissa visited one Sunday. No announcement, no apology, just the soft sound of the doorbell and her daughter standing there with a paper bag of muffins and a cautious smile. They sat at the table, mother and daughter, quiet for a long time. Finally, Melissa said, "I still don't understand it all, Mom, but I can see he makes you peaceful." Elaine smiled. "That's all I ever wanted to be." Melissa reached across the table, squeezed her mother's hand. For the first time in years, there was no tension in the gesture, only warmth. When Ryan returned from the market that afternoon, Melissa greeted him politely, then lingered longer than expected. He didn't say much, just thanked her for the visit, his tone respectful, steady, and somehow, that simplicity began to rebuild what explanation never could. That evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, Elaine stood on her balcony again, the same spot where she had once questioned everything. Now, the silence didn't ache, it rested. Ryan joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. He handed her one, and they stood side by side, watching the city lights appear one by one. "You ever think we'd make it here?" he asked. Elaine smiled faintly. "No, but then again, everything worth finding usually begins in doubt." He laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You know, people still talk. They always will," she said, sipping her tea. "But this time, I don't mind being the story." Below them, the hum of traffic faded into evening calm. Inside, the framed photo of Melissa sat upright again, no longer turned away. Elaine leaned her head gently on Ryan's shoulder, not as a woman seeking strength, but as someone who had already found her own. And there, above a city that once judged her, she closed her eyes and finally understood. Love is not the absence of pain or fear or age. It is the quiet decision to keep walking toward light, even after the world has turned away. The city slept beneath a silver moon, and somewhere in that stillness, Elaine Whitmore finally understood what so many spend a lifetime chasing. That love isn't about finding someone new to fill the silence. It's about learning to hear peace inside it. Her story wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat, but it was true. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for. To live a life honest enough to be remembered, even by those who once walked away. Because in the end, time doesn't ask if we made the right choices. It only asks if we were brave enough to make them. So tonight, as her laughter fades into the soft hum of a quiet room, we remember Elaine Whitmore, a woman who dared to begin again when the world told her not to. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments. What moment in Elaine Whitmore's journey moved you the most? And if you were listening closely, you might notice how often Elaine Whitmore's name came up. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, the next chapter is already waiting. Just click the video that's about to appear, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a moment of what happens next.